My name is Glenn Tracy. I'm teaching TE 804 this semester. I teach it quite often. It's called Multicultural Education. I teach it a little differently than maybe other people do. I try to throw in a lot of curveballs and sliders and different approaches and perspectives. I use a lot of videos. I'm going to maybe change up things a little bit this semester, at least in my philosophical approach. I've posted the syllabus. I tried to limit the assignments. So you've got an interview you'll be doing, a final project, and one essay, and mainly a lot of weekly discussions. So each week I will pose some questions. I'll generally do a video like this, or I'll definitely have several weeks. I'll have movies for you to watch, documentaries. I've got them on all kinds of things. I've got some of them in the actual syllabus listed as part of the assignments, but I may make some changes in the syllabus. So don't try to work ahead and get everything done in advance. I don't operate that way. We are a community, a class, and we need to stay together. If you have some situations coming up, you can email me, and I can talk to you about it. So I look at multicultural education. First of all, I don't even like the term multicultural particularly. I don't like it because it's a political battle. It's political football, whatever you want to call it, soccer ball. People get into fights over all kinds of things dealing with diversity, differences, everything from affirmative action to privilege. And I find a lot of these terms generally turn people off and just lead to arguments. And if you're a teacher and you talk about diversity and talk about multicultural, depending on where you are, those terms may not be very welcome. Certainly you can use those terms, but I like to get results. So if you can get people to do the right thing and to be more accepting and tolerant, I don't even like the word tolerant. Tolerant sounds like you're calming down somebody who's intolerant. I like the word welcoming and accepting and compassionate and ethical, So I'm going to be giving you some new terminology, at least in terms of how you can think about when you encounter people of different perspectives, and how you yourself can learn to think about people without as much emotion and with more understanding. And then I can't explain that to you now. It's something that you just have to experience in the course and discussions, and I hope I have some success there. If I don't, I'm going to give it my best shot. The two texts are very inexpensive. This one is, you can even use an older one, Teaching Strategies for Ethnic Studies. It's really more about teaching it. I like this book because it's fairly short in the chapters that I require you to read, about four chapters, 5. And then the rest of the book deals with different groups in American background and history. I will, everything from Puerto Ricans and Cubans in the United States, Hispanics, Jewish, European ethnic groups, Native Americans, African Americans, even Native Hawaiians, Filipinos. We're not going to read the entire book, but it's got good references in there. And it's an inexpensive book. You don't have to buy the latest version of it. Intent. The information in there is, I'm going to be talking about on the video. Sure, I want you to read it, but I try to compress it and so I can get it into the material that we really need to deal with. Okay, I'm not giving tests in here over how well you read the book, how many details you remember. I'm more interested in critical thinking and deep thinking than I am in memorization, which is pretty much a waste of time. That's not to say reading's a waste of time. Reading's always not a waste of time, as long as you are thoughtful as you read. So my first assignment this week, my other book, by the way, Mary Pfeiffer, who's from Lincoln, Nebraska, who wrote another book called Reviving Ophelia, or is it Resurrecting? I forget. Oh, Reviving, yes, Ophelia. This is a book about refugees living in Lincoln, Nebraska. I'm going to be talking about ethnic, and people are different in many different ways, everything from languages, sexual orientation. So you're going to have videos on different aspects of it, the way people speak in different parts of the United States, and how to think about people with other English as a second language. So I got some fun videos too. I've got painful videos. That movie Bully, you may have heard of it. Very painful. I really have never watched it all. It's that disturbing to me. And I also got videos on stereotypes, treatment of women, videos on disabilities, videos on Temple Grandin is one of them. If you know who she is, you can look it up. It's a very good movie. And so I tried to get a Civil War movie about not our Civil War, but El Salvador's Civil War. So all this stuff is I'm going to be throwing at you. So you'll spend several bit of time every week, not so much reading as much as you'll be watching videos, which I'm sure you do that anyhow. And I will let you know if these are appropriate for your kids. Most of them are, but some of them are too harsh, and some of them have rough language. So just so you know. And some of them are just disturbing, even though they're nothing particularly objectionable about them. It's just objectionable people, the way they behave. First assignment this week will be a culture map. And in this class, this is my classic lead-off assignment. And I've already sent you, it's on the discussion. I've sent you the instructions on it. And you go to the discussion page, and then you'll write 3 paragraphs. This is a bigger discussion than normal because you have to introduce yourself, talk about your culture map, your background, in other words, and then also the value of backgrounds and the use of the culture map. And you'll say, what the heck's a culture map? And I could show you one here. I think I have one somewhere, but I've already got examples on the page, 1 or 2, and you'll see what they are. But I want you to make it a colorful map, a big map, not a poster board, but big enough that when you take a picture of it and put it or as an attachment, it spans out to it's a big, big enough that people can see it. Shouldn't be like a postage stamp you took a picture of and nobody can see what's on it. So if you have problems with it, you can always send it to me, but you should be able to take a picture with your phone or with your camera if you need to use camera and put it on there, and then write about introducing yourself to the class. I've got all the assignments for every week, but they may change, so don't get too high on jumping ahead. I'm not beholden and I'm obligated to an assignment until I actually give it to you. My Facebook just dinged. So I think that's pretty much all I want to say to you right now, except for one thing. Now, I mentioned I didn't like the term multicultural too much. It's too political. The word's burned out, kind of, really. What I like to talk about is experiencing differences, and I think it gets around. I actually thought about this a lot philosophically, about how people deal with those that are different. And if you could imagine thousands of years ago when people encountered those that were different, usually it didn't end very well. About tribal wars going back through ancient times, the Greeks against the Romans. And of course we had nations then, but then if we go back further, any of the battles, the tribes that were formed all over the earth, the existence of tribes. My own ancestors were Gaelic or Celtic, I think is the word. And there was one large group of people that immigrated into Europe from somewhere in Asia or somewhere back, thousands of years ago, and they became the the Irish, the French, and then they gradually became the Franks, and they broke up into other tribes and other groups. And these eventually, Franks became French, and Germans were a tribe, Alemanni, and different groups that fought the Romans, and eventually they formed the Germans. And the Germans, under their nation, thought of themselves as a nation, a unique set of people that had certain, and I despise the whole idea of racial, everything about race and the idea that race is some kind of a scientific or a documented fact when it is not. So we'll get to that later. But so how do we deal how do we experience and help our students and comport ourselves, prepare ourselves that when we deal with those that are different? And you can think back when you first met someone from a certain country or someone with a certain situation. Maybe they were blind, they had some disability, maybe they spoke another language. When you were a little kid, when you first met people outside your family, how shy you were. I remember I used to hide, I didn't want people looking at me. And little kids, that's a natural thing. So you can think about that, So what do you do in your school to create a school that's welcoming and accepting of others? And how do you change the attitudes of people that think they already know everything and maybe have a negative or a not very welcoming attitude towards those that are different? The long struggles for those with special needs, the history and legal wrangling and congressional laws that had to be passed, disabilities. That's just one example. I'm going to show you a movie on Temple Grandin about how people dealt with autism. And you probably, if you're familiar with someone who has autism or however we want to state that, I want to be careful with that. And I want to be careful in this class because I don't want to go in and say, hey, I'm going to teach you about SPED, or I'm going to teach you about, I'm going to teach you about Filipinos or African Americans or Native Americans, because I'm not one, okay? I don't identify with other groups. I identify with kind of Midwestern people. You could say white, or you could say whatever you want to call me. But I have to really think carefully about bringing other people in so that they get to choose how they are to be explained, because I think there's nothing worse than someone from one group are trying to explain another group, or claiming some special knowledge because I read a couple of books or I saw a movie. I have terribly limited knowledge of most other cultures. I know a lot, but I don't know tiny bit of what really all the knowledge there is. There's nothing worse than having someone from Germany explain to you what cowboys are, or someone from the United States explain to you about Southeast Asia and China and Japan and their customs, unless they've lived in that culture and have extensive experience. It usually is kind of risky, or people making comments. That's why you end up with social media stuff all the time, people saying things that have offended others. So I'm always careful when I'm on here. I put these on public YouTube. I try to, maybe that's a little risky, but I'm trying to make this accessible to you. I don't have the videos like my other videos. I have links to those in our system, but I find that it's useful. I use YouTube all the time to teach myself about all kinds of aspects. I love history. So my background is I teach English as second language. So dealing with multicultural issues and diversity is natural for me. I'll tell you more about myself in another video. I don't want this to be too long. Otherwise, you'll go back to the football game tonight, since it's Sunday night. Thank you. And I look forward to hearing from you or reading about you in the discussion.